Welcome to the Too Dad to Quit podcast,
the podcast where we highlight stories of dads on the other side of divorce
to inspire and give strength to dads going through it.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Yoel.
On this week's episode, we have Scheer. He's a reporter for Reuters for over 26 years. He has 2 children, and he's a fascinating fellow. He's actually a good friend of mine. And I was really excited to get him on the podcast because he's got stories, not related to his divorce, about his 26-year journalist career and how he started as a guy in a little small town with nothing to do and made it to be the economic guy in all of Israel, reporting on all the startups, all the tech, and visiting all of the offices, the industries, getting all the scoops before anybody else knows it. He's a humble guy. So pulling those stories out of him was not easy, but I think that he has a lot of really cool stories he was able to share. Beyond his wisdom and his experience, he's a thoughtful guy. He even dropped a couple of books that he was able to use to kind of let his kids know what the divorce, what was going on. And we'll put the links in below. One about, having 2 houses, and another one about, the kid not feeling like he caused the divorce. And that's really, really important. I know for myself, my whole life, I thought I was the problem, and I was only 8 months old when my parents got divorced. So these books, are really, really useful. And if you're able to use them, we highly suggest it. Yoel, you don't know him well, so what did you get out of this episode from Steve?
Yeah, well, now I feel like I know him a little bit better, but it was interesting. Like, you're talking about him being humble, and I was going to say, like, don't let the fact that he looks so unassuming to fool you, because like you said, he's interviewed some really the top of the business world in Israel, not just the business world, prime ministers, as you'll see from the interview and you'll hear. And so he's a really impressive person. And yeah, I actually jotted down some takeaways in terms of our audience and those going through the divorce process or having gone through it. He has some real good gems. Like you said, he was so attentive that he even brought a couple of books for the audience, which is awesome. And we're going to link to that. Some takeaways that, our audience could look out for during the interview. I mentioned this in a previous podcast with Jeremy that we did recently. He just talks about the fact, he doesn't strike me, you know him a little better than me, Ben. He doesn't strike me necessarily, and I could be wrong about this, he doesn't strike me as an overly emotional person. But yet again, here's another example of a man who was willing to share quite publicly on the podcast that he cried regarding his, over his divorce. He was willing to talk about that. Another example of a man being very sort of raw about how emotional the process can be, and that's totally okay to feel those feelings. This is interesting in that he actually said that he was the one who initiated the divorce. So I think it's important for our audience to get that perspective as well. We do talk a lot, Ben, about the fact that a lot of the cases the divorces are initiated by the wives. But in this case, as you can see, it was something that he said that was more sort of initiated by him, but he definitely still has that pain, and he definitely still brings a lot of perspective. So I really like that. Some other things that I jotted down just about how his role, how important his children are to him, that they come first. I thought that was really amazing. He was willing to give up a meeting with, I think it was the prime minister,
the finance minister.
The finance minister. Thank you. You've got a better memory than me. Either way, somebody really high up, and he gave that up because he has his, he had to pick up his son from school, or he had to be home for his son. I thought that was great. He talked about the challenges that he faces, the fears that he had, the financial fears, and the fact that he's persevered. And here he is today, still thriving in his career, thriving as a dad, and thriving as a person. And there was so much more that we could have gotten into off camera, off recording. We had so many other discussions, and we'll definitely have to get him back for round 2.
Yep. And here we have Scheer. On today's podcast, we have Scheer. He was born in Queens, New York, and raised on Long Island. He is a proud dad to a son, 10, and a daughter, almost 12. Stephen has been working as a journalist for the Reuters news agency for the past 26 years. He is the head of economic and financial news in Israel. He is also an avid sports fan, especially the Islanders.
Oh, wow. New York Islanders.
The Islanders.
Wow. A hockey fan. All right. I'm from Canada. I'm from Canada originally. So, Islanders fans and Toronto Maple Leafs fans. I don't know, man. If I would have known before, Ben, I don't know if I would have allowed you to invite Steve on.
I know that. That's why I did not tell you at all. But if you ever read his newsfeed, you would know that he is an avid Islanders fan.
Hockey is
All
my
right.
favorite sport, and the Islanders. I grew up in the '80s when they were winning cups. No.
Oh
And
my gosh.
I'm a
yeah.
I'm a Devils fan. So
Oh my goodness. We were going okay with the Islanders. Wait, Steve. So you grew when you grew up, it was like the Mike Bossy years, John Tonelli, those guys.
Yes.
Was Billy Smith in net?
He was the goalie. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Billy
It was
Smith, man.
a great team.
Yeah. That was the first dynasty, and then the Edmonton Oilers took over, if I remember correctly from my
They
hockey
did.
trivia.
They
Yeah, nice. All right, cool. All right, very good. Look, I don't have much of a say. The Leafs, I don't think they've won a cup since '67.
but they have the Hall of Fame. So that's okay, right?
That's right. That's right. We've got the Hockey Hall of Fame, downtown Toronto. Anyway,
On my bucket list.
So Steve, what can you tell us a little bit about your background, your family? What made you Steve?
What maybe Steve? As a journalist, I'm not used to being on this side of the questioning, by the way. So I don't know. I grew up in a modern Orthodox community on Long Island since I was 5-6 years old. Have a brother, and we had a small group of friends, and it was don't want to say it's boring, but it was boring. It was not exciting. I'm sorry to say, I did not have an exciting childhood. I went to school, had friends.
You played
played-
sports?
I played what?
Did you play sports?
Yes, I played Little League for my shul Little League team,
For all who don't know, a shul is a synagogue.
synagogue team. I played on my high school softball team. I played on my high school hockey team, floor hockey team. So I'm not a very good athlete, but I'm an okay athlete, and sports is an outlet for me. So
Okay. And so you were in West Hempstead or Long Island through high school?
through college,
Oh,
basically.
okay. And you majored in journalism, or that came later? You wanted to be an Islander?
Well, I would have loved to play for the Islanders, but I couldn't skate so well. And so basically I decided I wanted to be a sports writer. That's what I wanted to do. So when I started college, I went to Queens College, and I was covering the lacrosse team, if I'm not mistaken, and the water polo team. They didn't have any good sports for me, but my father wanted me to go into computers or be an accountant like him. So I indulged, and it wasn't for me. I ended up switching to Baruch College, which is in Manhattan. I tried computers again. That did not work for me. Eventually, I settled on journalism. I was good at it. I was a crappy student, but English and writing was my only talent. So I went with it.
Nice. And where was your first job?
Well, in journalism,
Yeah.
I was writing for a local weekly West Hempstead newspaper I covered the West Hempstead High School football team and local basketball teams, high school basketball teams, briefly. My first professional job came right after college. I moved to Connecticut, Norwich, Connecticut, in a newspaper called the Norwich Bulletin. And I was covering business, tourism, whatever, for a year and a half. I was very lucky. Mystic, Connecticut was nearby. It's beautiful up there,
Yeah.
southeastern Connecticut. I was at the opening of I think it's called the Foxwoods Casino.
Mhm.
I was there opening night, covering it. It was great.
Awesome. You have any? How did Norwich compare to West Hempstead, to Long Island?
I think that Norwich was. I remember my interview when I went to Norwich. It was Lincoln's birthday. Back in the 90s, Lincoln's birthday was a holiday. Washington's birthday and Lincoln's birthday. So I was driving around with the editor, and I said, "Wow, this city really shuts down for Lincoln's birthday." He goes, "No, this is the way it is all the time. It's very quiet." I lived there a year and a half, met some nice people. It's a small city, and as far as religious community, there really was a small one. And I came back to New York every other weekend. But I got a good start in journalism. The editors were very good to me. They didn't charge me for Jewish holidays. They were very good about it. They were very good about it. So.
And by then, Stephen, so just so I'm clear, you had decided not to pursue the career in sports, and you had merged into business writing by then. Was that sort of the idea?
Business writing was a default because I couldn't be a sports writer because of Sabbath, Shabbat. It just wasn't happening. And since I went to Baruch, which was a business-oriented school, and my major was business journalism, the newspaper in Connecticut said, "Oh, we need a business reporter, so Steve would be good." So it kind of fell into my lap. Business writing fell into my lap. So,
Cool.
and I find that business and sports writing are very similar styles of writing. You know, there are rallies. You know, there's a lot of sports in it.
Yeah, we don't like to get into politics here, but ever since I was a kid, I used to say politics is just sports for adults.
That could be.
And,
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
And you went from Norwich straight to Reuters?
No, I had a 3.5 year stop at Dow Jones in Jersey City. I was covering financial markets, mostly the bond market. It's very exciting stuff.
Okay.
They put me on the graveyard shift because they were upset. I didn't tell them I couldn't work on Friday nights and Saturdays, so they banished me to the graveyard shift.
And how long did you last there?
I lasted 16 months. And then they finally moved me to dayside. I was getting very good marks in my reviews, and I ended up covering a little bit of the Federal Reserve. So I got a chance to cover a little economic news. And then when I had the opportunity to go to Reuters, I took it.
Nice. Do you have any like crazy stories covering all this news, all this time? Any famous people you met? Any politicians that were kind of wonky?
I cover mostly business people. I've covered Federal Reserve people, Alan Greenspan, Robert Rubin was Treasury Secretary at the time, Lloyd Benson was around. I mean, these are, you know, not exciting people, but good policymakers. And I'm sure I have a couple of stories. One of my favorites is Joe Lieberman. if you've heard of him.
Yeah.
He's the senator, at the time, a junior senator from Connecticut. And he and I became close because anytime I needed something, I would call him up and he'd talk to me. And I interviewed him in his office in Hartford once. And I asked him a very simple question. And he said, no one ever asked him this question. I said, how do you vote on Shabbat, on Sabbath? And he goes, no one ever asked me that. And because, you always see Congress, you always see they push the button. But he said in the Senate, it's a yay, nay. So you don't have to worry about that. He was a really interesting guy to talk to. And many years later, when John McCain was running for president, he was in Israel and they were at Yad Vashem, Holocaust Museum. And he noticed me and we were chatting a little bit. So I like him a lot. He was always nice to me. So
Nice. Who was your first like one-on-one big time sit down interview?
one-on-one sit down. Wow. Well, Lieberman was one of them. I mean, in college, I worked for the school newspaper and I did a lot of stories with officials there, but that doesn't really count. Also, when I was in college, I was the sports director of our radio station. So I had press passes to all the sports team,
Nice.
meaning I interviewed Wayne Gretzky and Patrick Ewing and Mario Lemieux and Pete Sampras, and it was a lot of fun.
Wow,
Did
that's
any
awesome.
did any of those I guess sports people, you were so into sports, did any of them, like when you met them, it was like, now I understand why they're like the greatest or why they're the best? Is there any like quality when you met with them that like stuck out?
As far as personalities,
Yeah, whatever. The trait, personality. When they walked into a room, everybody just went, or
well, when Wayne Gretzky walked into a room, people were like, wow. But he was really, really low key. He was very low key. I do remember my first time I went to an Islander game, and I'm sorry I'm telling all these stories. My first time I covered an Islander game, they lost. And my first time I went over to the captain, his name was Brent Sutter, and he's like, I'm not talking. I'm like, oh, great. But the goalie, Kelly Rudy, was like, you can come over here, don't worry about it, we'll talk. He was very nice to me. But I learned a lot about journalism from covering all these sports games, because I would watch the New York Times reporter, the Daily News, the Post. I'd watch them question the athletes and the coaches. And I was sitting with them and we would just talk. I talked to, I had phone numbers of all of the beat writers, and they were always really helpful to me.
it's great.
So
Cool.
Nice.
So just to jump, so now you live in Israel. So what brought you to Israel? Like what's the sort of bridge from, journalism and business in the, I don't know if you said Connecticut in the States, to bringing you international via Reuters to Israel? What's that process?
So back in the mid 90s, I was working for Dow Jones, and I was reading that Israel was becoming a high-tech powerhouse. Remember, this goes back almost 30 years ago. And I went to my boss and I said, hey, or at least the boss of the emerging markets division. And I said, are you thinking of opening an office in Israel? And they said, as a matter of fact, yes. And the person that we had thought was going to go and open the office in Jerusalem backed out. So would you like to go? Well, I was like, great. So I moved out of my apartment in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, I ended up breaking up with someone, and I had my tickets to come, and then the budget was cut, and that was it. No Israel. It was kind of devastating. So 6 months later, the budget was renewed, and they decided to go with someone else.
Oof.
So
How did that feel?
I was very hurt. It was frustrating, which is the reason why I went to Reuters. And I told them in my interview that I want to eventually get to Reuters. And they said, okay, we'll work on it. And it took me 3 years at Reuters, and I ended up getting transferred here. So it took me a little longer to get to Israel than I thought, but I got here.
Had you visited Israel before?
I spent my post-high school year here in yeshiva.
And ever since then, it was your goal. It was your goal to come back.
Oh, no. After my yeshiva year, I said, I can't live here. It's so primitive. You're putting these asimonim, these little coins into the telephone. There was no sports. I had to listen to games on shortwave radio, Armed Forces radio. I'm dating myself.
Yeah.
And this is pre-internet. I mean, even when I got to Israel in 2000, I was still using AOL dial-up. Yep. Remember AOL dial-up?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that was in 2000.
So,
and I ended up getting here and I worked for 3 years, and I didn't know if I wanted to stay. I had nothing to keep me here, but it was a rough time back in the States, and I couldn't get a job back with Reuters there. So I stayed.
it was the crash. One of the crashes.
It was one of the crashes. Yeah, I remember after the 2001
The tech bubble.
tech bubble.
Yeah.
So,
But what changed your mind of not enjoying your year here and the primitiveness to
loved it.
I'm going to Reuters and I'm going to Israel? Like what changed?
What changed was, the 7 or 8 years later, when I was already established, Israel was more established, and Israel, it was a good story. Like from a journalism perspective, covering Israel high tech was very appealing to me.
So you followed the story.
I did follow the story.
And did you come single?
I came single.
Got
I
it.
came very single. Yeah, that was fun.
Okay. All right, very good. And so I guess let's fast forward a little bit. So you've been at Reuters for how many years?
26 years.
Wow.
This month.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
And part of that journey, somewhere in there, you got married?
Yeah, I got married in 2009.
Okay. And then you recently got divorced?
I got divorced literally 3 weeks before the first lockdown, 2020, February 2020.
Got it. Okay. And during that whole time, you remained working with Reuters, I guess?
I did. They were great to me. Even before the lockdown, I was lucky to be able to work from home once in a while. What do I need? I have a laptop. I could work from anywhere.
Sure.
I'd have a telephone. I can call people from anywhere. So I obviously was working from home exclusively
Right.
after COVID. So.
And did you take any, I guess, on new skills since the divorce? Kind of, before you were driven by the story, driven by the news. Did anything change after the divorce? Your priorities or how you worked, or I know you like to take your son to his baseball games and stuff like that.
It's one of my joys in life is to watch my son play baseball. Yeah. Even on days that are not mine. Yeah.
And you're able to go and watch him play.
I go as much as I can. Yeah.
That's great. What position does he play?
He plays every position. They rotate.
They rotate.
Yeah.
Awesome. And does
How old's your
is
son, how old's your son again?
Just turned 10 2-3 weeks
Oh,
ago.
wow. And he's already playing baseball. This is a softball or hardball?
No, it's Little League. It's baseball. It's
Little League baseball. Wow. They don't have hockey here in Israel, do they?
Well, they do.
They do.
They do. They have a league.
There are a few leagues.
Do they?
They
Yeah.
play up in Netanya. And
Like a kids league or I know they have ice hockey.
Adults.
No,
Oh
they
yeah,
do.
like the ice hockey. Yeah, actually, it's a
Yeah, yeah.
Toronto expatriate actually who runs it. Funny enough, Danny Spoda, good friend of mine. But they don't have like a floor hockey league for for kids your son's age or things like that, right? As far as
I
we
don't
know.
think so.
Huh. Cool. Okay, so we
Maybe
got
in the
him
Russian
baseball.
communities.
There are some unofficial leagues of roller hockey around.
Oh, cool. Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. So, okay. So, part of this podcast is kind of understanding the process you went through during the divorce and even after the divorce that kind of gave you, that I'm still going to go through life. I still have to function. I still, I need to be there for my kids. And we'd like to, dive into that a little bit because there could be somebody listening that's about to go through it or thinking about going through it, or, just needs, to hear someone else's story. And not everyone has a supportive community around them. And so we like to bring those stories to them. So, just starting from the beginning, is there, when it happened, even, if it was your initiative or her initiative, there's still some sort of pain and, waking up and realizing that you're in the house alone half the time, or, you need to figure out life from here, which is totally different than the life that you imagine. How was that process for you?
It was a painful process in the beginning, especially because therapy didn't work.
Between you two?
Between the two of us.
Couples therapy. I was going to ask that.
Couples
Okay, yeah.
therapy. Yeah, couples
Gotcha,
therapy. It didn't work. Getting to the point of getting divorced is tough. I mean, I didn't think I would, but I was crying, handing my ex the get.
The Jewish divorce.
Yeah, it was an emotional day.
And for all those that don't know, the process is it's done technically to bring about emotion. And part of it is you have to take the divorce agreement, the Jewish divorce agreement, and actually have to place it in the hand of your wife. And that's the only way to officially make that process happen and work. Continue.
And then, so that I took a trip to the States and I came back, and that night, the lockdown happened. So everyone's lives would change together, but it was especially tough on me, on anybody who got divorced, because you were basically on your own. When you didn't have the kids, you couldn't go anywhere.
Right.
Nothing was open. You were just
Couldn't see
by
anybody.
yourself.
Yeah.
You couldn't go out with friends. You couldn't go for a drink. It was, I didn't have any support system at all. There were those underground support groups that you talk about, but I wasn't a part of them at the time. And so that first year was not easy, especially on Shabbat, when there was no synagogue, people weren't inviting you. You literally were at home all day by yourself. I wasn't using phones or computers. I understand truly how some people decided not to stay observant. I don't judge them. It's a matter of survival, because I came this close to doing the same thing, you know. But I got through it. And then the vaccines came, and then people started inviting again, and it was a little bit better.
And did you seek help? I know you didn't have a big support system, but, and again, you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but therapy or online therapy, anything like that?
I didn't. I was fairly okay. I mean, I didn't, it wasn't, so I initiated, I was in a different place. Obviously, when you get to that point, it's totally different. But, you know, I had TV, I had work. So work was supportive, and I was working from home. And during the beginning of the Corona times, it was busy for journalists. Every day we were talking to Pfizer, and we were talking to lots of different people and businesses and unemployment numbers. I was busy that whole first year. And of course, the flip side is I was home and I got to spend a lot of time with my kids.
Right.
And that was amazing, because for many years, my kids were more mother's kids, you know. I mean, I was a good father. She was the primary caregiver, and I was always at work.
Right.
And that changed when Corona hit, and I was home all the time. And I developed a very good relationship with my kids.
Also,
I just spending a lot of time with them, you know, just spending a lot of time with them. That's really what it was. I spent time with them. We watched movies. We eventually went out we started traveling a little together. Just spending a lot of time together, because when you're the parent, there's no one else there. You've got to be responsible for them. At the time, they were 2-3 years younger, so they were younger, and I had to be there for them maybe much more. It gets overwhelming.
Yeah,
because it's like a nothing, an all or nothing. On days when you have the kids, it's exhausting. Get them up in the morning, make their lunches, and then when you come home, you got to feed them, got to make them dinner, get them ready for bed, make sure they're ready for school the next day. It's exhausting.
was it a big change for you to do all of those things?
It was a very big change. It was a very big change, because when you're married, you have someone to take some of those responsibilities and roles. When you're divorced, as you know, if you don't do it, no one does. So,
What's your custody arrangement? Just so our audience.
half, 50-50.
50-50.
So,
And
I have my kids Wednesdays and Thursdays and every other weekend, and she has them every Monday and Tuesday.
got it.
And then
Wait
we
a second, what
split
about
summers.
Oh,
are split.
yeah.
Summers are split, and holidays are split as well.
Got it. And did you find it, because you mentioned that your then wife at the time was more, again, you were always a great dad, as you said. But, there was maybe more of that sort of primary caregiving type of relationship with their mom. And, I'm assuming that you knew from the start that you wanted to have that joint custody 50-50 type of situation. Were you ever sort of, as you were going through the process of divorce, were you feeling scared or overwhelmed at the idea that exactly as you were describing that, once you do have that 50-50 time and you are the only caregiver when they're with you, that you've got to tend to all their needs and cooking and laundry? Was there a time where you were really kind of scared? Like, how am I going to do this?
Not at that part. My biggest fear was, and this is why it took so long to get divorced, was trying to figure out how financially I was going to be able to live. I didn't really have a fear about taking care of my kids. I knew that wasn't going to be a problem, but just financially was the tougher part for me, to get to the point where I knew I'd be able to support them and pay whatever I had to pay.
Right. And clear, and again, not to get into your personal financial details or anything like that, but you're sitting here today with us and you look great, and you look like things are going smoothly. So again, just as a message for our audience, despite those fears and those concerns, here you are persevering. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. It was a good decision. Look, obviously getting divorced is not an easy process. I was very fortunate. We had a pretty amicable divorce. We agreed on most everything. We purposely said we're going to put the kids first. Doesn't matter. We're going to put the kids first, and that's how we proceeded.
Mhm.
So
And in terms of your relationship with the kids, and I know they were younger, so maybe this is a bit more tricky or maybe not, but did you talk to them like as the process was happening? Were you able to sort of sit down with them, or it was more like they were younger and it was different in that sense?
what happened was we didn't say anything for a while. Even when the divorce process started, we wanted to shield the kids as much as possible until the last minute. It took like 3-4 months of silence with the kids, which was not easy. It was not easy. I was in the States and I knew that there might be an issue. So I bought 2 books that I read would be helpful. One of them, I brought them today, 2 Homes. It's a very basic, simple book. It's basically, my name is Alex. I have 2 homes. One is my mommy's, one is daddy's. My son took when we had told them extremely hard. He's a very sensitive child, and he was distraught for a long time. He still, by the way, has not fully recovered. He sometimes tells me from time to time he hates going back and forth from to our houses, even though it's not every other day. It could be every 5 days, sometimes, or every 2 days. It's not easy for him. My daughter doesn't seem to bother her, even though it might, but she doesn't express it. So after he was distraught, I read him this book and he calmed down. And then
Wow.
I have a second book, Was It the Chocolate Pudding? Basically also about a boy who thinks that the fact that he put chocolate pudding on the wall led to his parents' divorce, which was not the case. So I had to read both those books to them, and they basically calmed down after that. Thank God.
Wow. Thanks for bringing those books. That's amazing for our audience to see. I don't know if Ben, if you want to jump in, I just have another question that, again, some of these, as Ben was saying before, if you don't feel comfortable answering, but I know from my own perspective, I'll just say that a lot of times, just moving away from the kids for a second and talking about my interactions with my ex-wife, for all those in the audience, obviously I'm a divorcee myself as well, just to be clear about that. Similar arrangement to you, by the way. I have my kids on Wednesdays and Thursdays and every other weekend. How are you able to deal? I know a lot of men, I know for myself for sure, sometimes interactions with my ex-wife can be very difficult and challenging. So again, if you're comfortable talking about that, just for our audience listening, do you ever find, still even years later, there's challenging interactions? And if so, do you have sort of any sort of advice for people out there listening, how to sort of handle that, given that it's been a few years since your divorce?
One of the things that we didn't agree on was child raising. Obviously, that happens in, parents, in families that are married. One parent is always different than the other. We mostly interact on WhatsApp. So almost every day we have a conversation on WhatsApp about something with the kids. We both want the same thing for our kids. I'm not saying we agree on things, but we do both want the best for the kids. Like yesterday, we had a birthday party for my son. They started at her house with pizza making, and then they came over to my house afterwards for a movie. So, and cake. So we were able to split that up nicely. And both of us were able to experience the birthday party.
That's nice.
So you brought in, books for the kids.
I'm sorry, your book is very good too, by the way. I read it to the kids on patience. Trust me, I read it to them a few times.
I appreciate that. But what about you? Did you lean on any books to get you through this period? Like for myself, I'm not a reader, I'm a writer. But I actually started reading because of those nights you talk about where there's no one around and there's nothing to do and you just need to occupy your mind. Otherwise, it's not great.
I did read a book. I totally forgot the name of it. I got it on Amazon. It was basically how to deal with your ex. How not to be angry all the time and how to try to work things out better. I honestly forgot the name of the book. It's on my bedside table.
Okay.
It's still there. It tells you how to basically get through the process. It was very helpful. I'm not plugging it because I don't know the name.
It's okay. You can tell us later and we'll
Yeah.
we'll fill in the listeners. And the
Okay,
viewers.
okay, great.
It sounds like could be super useful too.
It's a small book. It's a small book. It's not much.
Nice. And did you take anybody like new hobbies? I always like to bring up Brad Pitt that took up sculpting to keep his mind occupied.
I didn't take up any new hobbies. Oh yeah, I joined Home's Place, which is a gym.
We can
That
tell.
was interesting. I tried to go as much as I could until it got a little expensive last year, but I did try to go. Going during COVID was interesting because you had all these different rules. But so that was one thing. But otherwise, my life didn't totally change, except I had days with my kids fully and days I didn't. I still was working, thank God. I mean, I was blessed that I was able to work. So that took up most of my day.
Did you dive in more with work than usual?
It was very busy. We were really busy. Covering COVID was busy. And I was the business reporter, so there were always business stories to write. The government was giving more money for this, and Pfizer was announcing this. So yeah.
Yeah, speaking of Pfizer, I think I remember you did a story where you actually went to go see these crazy freezers.
I did.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I always thought, hey, that's so cool. I know the guy who went to go see all the freezers when no one else had vaccines, and you were able to come and check that out.
So basically, there's Teva Pharmaceuticals has a logistics center in Shoham. You could see it off of Route 6. If you're driving on Route 6, you see it. It's this massive thing. That's where they store all their medicines. In the basement of that building, they had about 12 or so freezers that were capable of handling the COVID vaccines of -70 degrees Celsius. That was what we needed. Well, and by the way, a lot of countries didn't get the vaccines because they didn't have them. They didn't have these freezers. Israel was lucky. We got these vaccines. And you kind of just go into this building and you go downstairs, and in the corner of the basement, you have like these 12 freezers. And that's where they were stored. And then next to them, there was the sorting. So they come in these big packages. And then you have to, they took them and they made them into smaller packages. And then they sent them to all the health
clinics,
companies to distribute to the people. Yeah, that's kind of interesting.
I don't know. Part of me when I was in middle school, there was this, I don't know, we had to do like a mock story, and we had a mock election in school. And I was one of the kids that asked a bunch of questions, and the teachers were trying to push me to be a journalist. So like watching your career and to me, you're like Steve, but you're like sitting with prime ministers and other ministers, and getting into places that I wish I could get into. To me, it's just fascinating. And I know inside your head, there are some stories and some gems that I would love to hear. How many prime ministers have you sat with?
Let's see. When I first got here, it was Ehud Barak, and then it was Ariel Sharon. And during Ariel Sharon's time, Benjamin Netanyahu, was the finance minister.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent a lot of time talking to him. He would call a press conference all the time. And what would happen was, after the press conference was over, I'd want to ask him questions in English.
Right.
And he would be like, walk with me. So in the finance ministry, the room where they kept the press conferences was on one side of the hall, and his office was all the way on the other side.
Uh-huh.
So I'd have 2-3 minutes of private time with him, just to walk with him to his office. And he always, I'm not being political here, I'm just saying this is a purely journalistic thing.
Sure.
He always answered every one of my questions.
Wow. Awesome.
By the way, just speaking of what Ben's saying, in terms of meeting all these important people, have you ever found it tough to sort of juggle? Like, let's say you have a meeting or something comes up where you've got to meet, somebody high up in finance or whatever the case may be, but you've also got to pick up your kids from school or something like, does that conflict ever happen that you have to sort of resolve, or you've got it kind of systematic at this point?
My kids come first, believe it or not.
I believe it.
Sometimes when I want to interview, okay, good example, the finance minister, Victor Lieberman, they wanted to schedule an interview with him a few weeks ago. And they did it on a Wednesday afternoon at 4:00. And I said, I'm sorry, I just can't do it. My kids are coming back to me. I need to find another time. And we did it the next morning in the morning. But look, they're now getting to the point, the age is, where they're a little more self-sufficient. But I still feel that when they come home from school at 1:30, I need to be there, or at least at some point an hour or two later. I can't let them be on their own, for 5 hours, that is the one thing that's the toughest thing. Meals, getting them, because they're picky eaters.
I totally relate to that. I totally relate. I know, I find that challenging too.
Yeah. I have to make them a snack or a sandwich for lunch. And then when they come home from school, they have to eat. And sometimes they bring home friends. So I have to find something for their friends. And then there's dinner. And I'm still trying to work. I was always the cook in my marriage most of the time, but I find I do a lot more takeout than I used to. I'm not proud of it, but if I'm working until 5:30, I don't always have time to start cooking.
Yes.
So
And speaking about cooking, we've actually have been talking about maybe making a segment on cooking for dads. So everyone who's listening and watching, please let us know in the comments if that's something you'd like to see. We do have another
I
friend. We also have another friend that actually wants to do that himself. So I thought about joining forces. So please let us know in the comments, our DMs and on social media. We'd love to hear your feedback on that. I think a lot of dads can benefit from that, even if it's, taking hot dogs and making them into spaghetti monster hot dogs. So there's a lot of fun stuff you can do. Just because you're in the kitchen doesn't mean it's got to be French toast or toast and an egg.
French toast is great for leftover challah. Are you kidding me? That is one of my favorite things.
That was
I don't want to throw out the challah. Just make some French toast.
Yeah, that was my Sunday mornings growing up.
Yeah.
My father in an apron and French toast with a side of non-kosher bacon, and that was Sundays.
My kids love macaroni and cheese. Who doesn't, right? And I found that they were eating those packages of Wacky Mac too much. So I said, I'm gonna go out.
The neon orange. The neon orange.
Yes, and the other ones too. I decided I'm gonna start making my own macaroni and cheese. I bought cheddar cheese, I bought this and that.
How'd it go?
Came out good.
Yeah.
But it's very involved.
Mhm.
And they want the box. So it's easy to make.
Yeah.
Like I take a break when they come home from school and I'll make it.
But have you taught them to make it? Because that's where the switch happens. And I know your kids are still young, but when you can switch and have those things in the house and you say, all right, you want it, it's yours, you make it, I'll teach you how to do it. And
that is something that I'm going to do more in the very near future. I'm going to do that. It's I think they need to know. My daughter knows how to bake.
Mhm.
She bakes by her mother's house. She doesn't do much of that here by me.
Right.
So we'll get that. Look, I do make. They help me make a meatloaf. For some reason, I like meatloaf because it's meatball. You can use chopped meat. You could do anything with it. But they love meatloaf, and I buy.
you're blessed.
What?
You're very blessed.
They really do. Like I do try to cook as much as I could. If salmon is on sale, I'll buy a salmon, put a little teriyaki sauce on it, pop it into the oven for half an hour, and they love that. So meatloaf, meatballs, schnitzel, I do try to feed them as best as I could.
And fruits and veggies, are they fruits and veggie eaters?
They're so picky. Oh my gosh. So my daughter likes lettuce and cucumbers and avocado. My son will eat cucumbers, sometimes some carrots. They both don't like the same things, which makes it even tougher.
Yeah.
When the kids do not, right? The kids don't like the same things, right?
Oh, forget it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when you go to
Yeah.
pizza.
I wish my kids would eat eggs. Drives me crazy. They don't eat eggs. It would make my life a lot easier for breakfasts and things like that.
That's for sure.
Yeah. Don't like eggs.
So I see you brought a lot of notes with you, which we appreciate. Is there anything on there that we didn't cover? 'Cause
My whole list.
as a journalist, you came prepared, so.
Well, because it's an ADD thing. And, I used to think that it was not a good thing being ADD, and all of a sudden your head's going in different directions. So every time a thought came into my head, I write it down because I didn't want to forget it.
Sure. Let us in your head.
I think, I see this couple of things that I wrote down. some of the challenges of divorce. Look, I said, I do a good job, I think. I'm very hands-on. I have a great relationship with them. I speak to them every day, even when they're not with me. I tell them I love them. I think it's important. A couple of things are troublesome. Cleaning. I don't have the energy sometimes to clean properly. And it's really frustrating to me because I want people to come into my home and I look at my place and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I didn't have, for a while, I couldn't afford a cleaning person. Now, once in a while, someone does come in, helps do with the floors and the kitchen cabinets, sinks and the bathrooms. So that's a little better, but I have a lot of clutter I want to get rid of. I'm just tired.
Yeah, sure. Cleaning, I don't know about you, Yoel, but, to me, I have a priority list and making sure my kids know how to take care of themselves, know how to bathe themselves, know how to get ready for school, know how to get ready for the next day, know how to cook, know how to, prepare, and then have some downtime is more important than, staying on top of them to clean this, clean that, building a little bit and giving little jobs, I guess. So one of my daughters, she's the folding daughter. And I have 5 kids, so I'm cheating. But one of them is the folding kid. Another one is the cooking kid. Another one is the garbage taking out kid. So I've kind of split up. One of them is the sweeping kid, and then my son, he's I'll pick it up all off the ground if you just put it in a pile for me. So I, doing it a lot of teamwork, but it was never for me. It's kind of, you can decide what's going to be your stress point. And so I have all those other things in mind that I kind of pushed away, having a spick and span house. It's like when you have little kids in the house, you clean up and 2 seconds later, I remember when my daughter was young, we had this bookcase and her mother put all the books on the shelf by baby books, bigger books, English books, other books, and the whole thing. And 30 minutes later, my daughter went over to it and pulled out every single book and made a pile a mile high. And it was devastating to her. And I just laughed because it was she's just a kid. You can't expect the house to be perfect when there's kids in the house. So, when the kids are, hopefully out of the house at some point or not, it'll be grandkids. To me, a house that's perfect, mint, and there's not a spot around it, it's just not a house to live in. It's a house to go to, but not to live in. So, that's kind of my perspective. I don't know if it helps you or not, but every time we talk and you're like, oh, I don't want you to come over. Steve, I've got 5 kids. Don't worry about it. So that's kind of my perspective on it. So I try to limit the things that drive me crazy, I guess it's the easiest way to put it.
Right. Well, I have 2 things going. Go ahead. I have 2 things going against me. 1, I'm a procrastinator. 2, I'm not a neat freak. And actually, the third thing is the ADD. So it's you said about priorities, and unfortunately, cleaning is not a high priority. I grew up in a house where my mother was a religious cleaning nut, and she would constantly yell at me for not cleaning my room and keep it clean, and it was very traumatic at times. And I'm not like that. So the cleanliness part takes backseat. Look, I've been trying to convert one of my rooms into my office because I wanted to split my son and my daughter into separate bedrooms. And that room, which is supposed to be my office, is a storage room.
Right.
And I'm sitting there working on my dining room table in the dining room. It's not good because my kids come in, they come out. It's hard to work that way. And I've been trying to do this for 2 years.
Right.
And I keep on putting it off, and I keep putting it off and putting it off. So that's a little frustrating. it just, at the end of the day, when you have the kids especially, I'm working, I'm getting ready for dinner. They go to basketball or baseball, they come home at 7 o'clock, we eat. Now their bedtime is later, like 8, 9 o'clock. And by the time they're in bed sleeping, it's like after 9, I'm exhausted.
Right.
I just wanted to sit down and watch TV. That's what I want to do. I like TV, I like my shows, and that's what I want to do.
And I don't know if you're like me, like on those other days when they're not with me, I'm trying to work from like as soon as I wake up till after I should be sleeping, because I need to get in as much work as I possibly can so that I can have that extra time with them
Right.
on those other days. So to me, that's it. It's a decision. But again, I'm here to help, and
Thank you.
my services are always available to help you, and we'll get there, because I know this is on your list, even though it's being pushed off. I know it's something you want to do, and it's important to you, and I think it'll clear your head also, so you can do other things.
Right. I'm very lucky that I do have a relatively 9-to-5 job, not fully 9 to 5, but I have I used to have to work later when I had a different shift, but now I'm ending around 5. Obviously, news breaks in the evening and at night, I have to do it, but that's not every night. So.
What else you got?
Dealing with my ex lives around the corner, and she's part of the same social circle. So it's complicated sometimes dealing with friends who know both of us and are friends with both of us. I once had a friend he didn't do it on purpose, but he would just blabber, where I'm going, in front of her.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't think that was something that she needed to know. It wasn't anything illegal. It wasn't anything she didn't have to not know.
Right.
Her life is her life. My life is my life. We don't need to know what's going on in each other's life. So I got really upset. So dealing with mutual friends, I find to be very difficult. I don't know if you find it difficult, but I find it difficult.
Do you? Yes, sorry, Ben. No, this is a topic that really speaks to me. I mean, I could go on for hours and hours, as Ben knows, but I'll try and be brief. But did you find that you lost, a lot of in the divorce process? I mean, it's kind of almost cliche, where people are choosing sides or whatever. But in my experience, I feel anyways that a painful part of the divorce was really, it wasn't just a divorce of my ex-wife, it was also a divorce of her family, and also very much it spilled into friends. Did you find that it kind of affected your friendships, just because you're speaking about mutual friends?
No, not really. No, none of my friends really chose. They just chose to remain friends with us separately. As a matter of fact, I'm still on very good terms with her family. Yeah, I know it sounds odd, but
not my experience.
No, it's odd. Yeah, I still get along very much with her parents and her sister and brother and families. So
wow.
Yeah, but friends, for the most part, they, I don't think I lost any friends because of it.
So you're talking more amongst the divorce circles where it gets tricky.
It's more tricky when you're dealing with women than men, because they obviously will want to spend more time with her. So I'm not as friendly with some of my female friends as I used to be, which is just okay.
Got it.
I did start my own. It's not really an Anglo. That's not really a support group. A guy's WhatsApp group for divorced people. Most of the time it's a lot of jokes and things like that, but we sometimes have a serious conversation. There's 25, 30 people, and it keeps growing. People have questions they could ask.
But how does that work with the mutual? Again, I'm really interested in this because to me, it really is something, it's so different than my experience. How when you have mutual friends, but it sounds like you are keeping it separate in a certain sense. Like if somebody makes a party or somebody, like, how does that work? I mean, are they going to invite one or the other, or will you both go to the same party and be totally okay with that? Like, how does that work in actuality? I'm curious.
In the beginning, it was not easy. We had agreed we wouldn't go to the same parties, but because I have my kids on Thursday night, she doesn't. She gets to go all the good parties. So I got to the point where I said, I'm just going to go, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to go. And then we agreed that we sometimes see each other at the same parties. It's a little awkward, but we do go, and I don't always stay the whole time. I come later. If it's in Modi'in, I'll pop out like after the kids are, in bed or sleeping. And if it's out of Modi'in, like a wedding or something like that, then I either get a babysitter. Well, I usually get a babysitter. That's it. I don't like to, but I do.
Right. Yeah, I just wish I could sometimes, when it's interesting because, I think you would, I'm assuming everybody here have heard situations where people unfortunately feel like they have to choose or sort of make these decisions, which is fine. I mean, if that's what they decide, but sometimes I want to tell people, like, you don't have to like choose, you could invite both of us to your wedding, like we are capable of being in the same room together, so that's been, if I could share, that's been a struggle of mine, just to sort of accept the fact that I guess people don't know what to do. I try and really understand from their perspective. They don't know how to handle it. But as you're showing, we are capable of being together in the same room or even going to the same party, even if it may be a bit awkward in the beginning. So I'm glad you're sharing that with our audience.
Well, it does bother me because being part of so many divorce groups, you see some really bitter divorces. And that it breaks my heart. It really does. But both sides, where the exes just can't get along, they want revenge. I think it hurts the kids personally. And that's one of the reasons why we have our agreement the way we did, to protect the kids, keep them. It's bad enough for the kids that have to go through this, even in a good divorce. I see it with my kids. We both love them. They both spend a lot of time with us, but I can see it's not an easy thing going back and forth. But adding the mommy and daddy hate each other and are fighting all the time, even after divorce, kids are going to be in therapy their whole life.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I think that's why there's kind of a golden rule in these underground groups that whoever gets in the group first, the other one isn't allowed. Not so there isn't, having to choose or having drama inside those groups. There are exceptions, but that's kind of like the golden rule,
right?
Which also makes it into a competition, which is not great. Whoever gets in there first, but yeah,
that's true.
And anything else on that list?
No, you talk about being a dad, and I love being a dad. That's really what I wrote down. I love being a dad. I was very close to my dad. I miss my dad a lot.
You want to say anything about your dad?
He was a great dad. I didn't fully appreciate him until he was gone 6 years ago. And it's kind of sad. I have a lot of questions. I realized he was fair like you have different kids with different personalities, and you have to treat them differently because they have different
Right.
personalities.
Yeah.
You know, what works for one doesn't always work for the other, even though if the other kids don't always agree with it.
Right.
And you have to do what you need to do. And he was great at that. And I miss it. I have so many questions for him. Look, it took me a long time to be a dad. You know, I got married late. I used to go to like hotels for the weekends with married friends, and I just watch parents with their kids in the swimming pool, and I got so jealous. I was like, oh, I can't wait to be a dad. Can't wait to be a dad. You know, Father's Day to me is more important than my birthday.
Right.
I love being a dad.
Yeah.
You know.
Do you have a story about your father and you that you like to share?
Store
Like one memory that,
memory of my day. God, you know, he was always there for me. You know, one night I could always call him anytime. I remember on Christmas Eve, I went out, I came back, I was coming home at 2:00 in the morning, and the car got stuck on the highway, and it's like I called him. He comes to pick me up, but he was always there for me. Always there for me. I mean, always there for me. You know, and I was not an easy child.
Can't
But-
imagine.
But
Can't imagine that.
he used to say, "Can't wait till you're a father. I hope you have a kid like you were." My daughter is sort of getting there, but you know, I hope not to the extent that I was. You know,
Nice. Sounds like a sweet man.
he really was. He left this earth too soon. So I don't want to get too sappy.
That's okay. Well, we always like to end the podcast with some kind of advice for guys that are going through it. And, something to just, some thought that kind of you had in your mind when you were going through the whole process, the idea of valleys and then, mountaintops. So we're talking, our target is more the people that are in the valley or about to enter the valley. And you're more or less getting to that other mountaintop. So looking back, what advice would you give yourself back then?
Looking back, I do believe, I don't know if I said it before, but yeah, it was towards the end, it was very bad. You don't think there's going to be a light at the end of the tunnel. You really don't. It's your whole life is coming crashing in. You don't know how you're going to be able to support yourself, your kids. And how you're going to live. And after I finished crying, giving the get, you kind of feel like a relief, like you could start again, because you really are starting a little bit over again. You've got to do things that you didn't think you know how to do. Look, if you don't cook, you got to learn how to cook.
Yeah.
Probably. You got to learn how to do laundries. You got to learn how to make lunches. One of the toughest things, and I haven't done it yet, is do my daughter's hair. I don't know how to do my daughter's hair. She comes from her mother's house looking so nice.
Yeah.
And for me, I don't know how to do her hair.
Here's a ponytail.
Yeah, here's a cuckoo.
Yeah.
Here you go. I don't think.
That's right. I get lucky. I have older daughters that help my younger daughters. So yeah.
But once I got through COVID, and COVID was actually a blessing for me. I really do. I got a chance, even though it was not easy from a social standpoint, it helped me with my relationship with my kids, because we get to spend a lot of time together. And my son, who was very much a mama's boy, is now 50-50, I guess you could say. We bond over sports, baseball, our love of Star Wars and Marvel movies. We have a great relationship now. I have a great relationship with both my kids, better than I ever had.
By the way, Steve, sorry to interrupt with Star Wars. I just started watching that with my 10-year-old, which I did with my oldest son, I think probably around the same age. So we've got that in common as well. Just started Star Wars with him. Anyway,
that's really great. You have to watch it 4, 5, 6, then 1, 2, 3.
Yes, I was thinking like, what's the best order? Like, should I start it from the first one? I was like, no, I've got to go in the same order in which Lucas put them out. So amazing. Anyway, yeah, we're making our way through 4. The problem is I can't watch it with him when my younger daughter, who's 8, is around because she doesn't want to watch it. So we have to kind of carve out time. Anyway, yeah, carry on.
No, you're right. That's tough. When the kids, they don't want to watch the same movies anymore. I have a second TV, so my daughter just doesn't want to watch. She can watch something else. I'm okay with that.
Nice.
It hurts a little bit, but not too bad. So to bring it all together, it's good. You know, you are relieved. It was a weight lifter off your shoulder, and things might financially be tough, but you're happier, hopefully. I am.
And looking forward, are there any big plans you have? I'm pushing you to write a book about all your crazy stories, but are there any big plans or anything you want to plug, or your socials so people can follow you? I know, on Twitter you have a pretty significant following.
People can follow me on Twitter. I don't have a lot of Twitter followers. It's Stephen M. Scheer. And maybe I have like 600-700 people. I mostly tweet my articles or other people's business articles, but I also do the Jets and the Islanders and the Yankees and the Nets. So
awesome.
I got the sports and I got the business, Israel business. So
amazing.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And I think you dropped a bunch of wisdom here that are going to help a lot of people. And really, I hope you enjoy this side of the interview a lot more, because I think there's a lot of gems in there, and a lot of stories that need to come out. That's 26 years of journalism. You've got stories to tell, and I hope you put them together so people can hear. Even the Middle East piece of it, which a lot of people don't get to see the behind the scenes. And like you said, you've had tons of hallway walks with high politicians, and I think it could be something that everybody would enjoy.
Thank you. I didn't even get into my covering suicide bombings and the Gaza pullout.
We'll save it for the next.
Yeah, that kind
of.
But I do appreciate you guys. What?
I said that will be round 2. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We'll get you back for another. Although it's not a political show, as Ben said.
No. But I do appreciate you guys for doing this podcast. It's long overdue for dads.
And on that note, if anybody wants to follow us, toodadtoquit.com, toodadtoquit on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, and we're looking to share your stories. And please reach out to us. Share it with your friends. Somebody who has a story to share. We're just looking to inspire those guys that are going through it, and dads that are going through breakups, divorce, and it's a rough time. And the support is really, really important. And thank you so much. This has been amazing.
Thanks a ton, Stephen. Really, it was amazing.
Thank you both.
Yeah.
And for all those who have listened until now, thank you. Drop a comment, Too Dad to Quit, so we know that you made it all the way through and you did not quit. And we'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to the Too Dad to Quit podcast. Available at toodadtoquit.com. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.